Annihilation is a 2018 cosmic horror movie written and directed by Alex Garland, loosely based on the 2014 novel by VanderMeer, and it's had millions of people, including myself, scratching our heads over what it all means, especially the ending. Its ambiguity is a huge part of its appeal. It wouldn't be cosmic horror otherwise. But since making my first video on the film, I have encountered some surprising details, including some rather buried comments from VanderMeer himself. And together these details have given me a more concrete interpretation of what this film might ultimately be saying, and we are going to get into all of that. My name is Thorogood, I get into the deeper meaning of movies. Do subscribe if this sort of video is your thing. So the book, Annihilation, is the first instalment in the Southern Reach trilogy by VanderMeer, and the film rights for that first book were obtained by Paramount and Scott Rudin in 2013, before it was even published. Alex Garland was hired to write and direct in 2014, and his screenplay was a loose adaptation of that first novel only.
What I felt when I was writing the book, when I was reading the book, that's as Freudian as it gets. It was the experience of reading the book that felt most relevant. So I did something slightly odd with the permission of the writer. That's what I thought I had at any rate. I hope I did. Which was to do it was an adaptation which was a memory of the book. So instead of going back and rereading it and underlining passages, I did an adaptation from my experience of having read it without going back to the book. And what that means is that sometimes the film correlates very closely and sometimes it doesn't. So it really has a function of memory. And I thought that that was a way to be faithful to the thing that I experienced most strongly, which was its dreamlike nature.
It's as if Alex Garland did to the novel what the Alien Presence does in the story. It takes an existing world and transforms it into something new. With that said, let's consider the ending of the film and those surprising details that have kind of reframed how I now see it. It goes without saying that from now on, there will be spoilers. Okay, so as Lena and her husband Kane hug at the end of the film, we are left with a question. Who are these characters? Are they the same people they were when they ventured into the Shimmer, or have they been forever changed? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Well, the film suggests to us that this isn't the original Kane, it's his alien doppelganger. But it sort of is Kane in some way, it's an almost identical replica. As for Lena, well, this is the original Lena, but because, like Kane, she spent so much time within the Shimmer, her body and mind have been profoundly transformed. So you could say that both these characters are now something new, a hybrid of human and alien, maybe, with Kane being distinctly more alien and Lena preserving more of her original humanity.
You aren't Kane, are you?
I don't think so. Are you Lena?
And as they hug, their eyes are faintly shimmering, as someone pointed out in the comments of my previous video, as we shall see. And this reflects their new alien natures. So that's fine, and this ambiguity is what the film wants us to inhabit. But what's surprising, and what I've been kind of reflecting on, is the fact that we saw the Shimmer burn down. Lena passed the grenade to her alien doppelganger. It burst into flames and transferred the fire to its network of interconnected organisms, bringing the whole thing to the ground. The colourful boundary of the Shimmer seemed to dissipate, and it looked very much as though the Shimmer had been destroyed. And yet, as soon as that happens, Kane does not collapse with it. No, his condition stabilises.
When the Shimmer disappeared, his blood pressure stabilised and his pulse rate started to rise. A few hours later, he was not only awake, he was lucid.
And this suggests that the Shimmer has not been destroyed entirely, but has instead become a more permanent part of Kane, at least, and perhaps the wider world. The fire is not the end of the Shimmer, it marks the moment that it merges I guess, fully in some sense with the planet on which it is growing. And this interpretation was offered as a possibility by, among other people, a YouTuber called Alt-Shift-X. He made a brilliant, concise video essay shortly after the release of the film called Annihilation Explained. And here's what he says about the ending.
Lena reunites with Kane, who she now knows is actually an alien clone. And the Kane asks whether she is really Lena. The movie ends with Lena's eyes glowing bright, which implies some kinda alien juju, so maybe this Lena is actually an alien clone. Maybe the shimmer didn't really fall, it just expanded to include the whole world.
Very well put. Now, Jeff VanderMeer, the author of the novel on which the movie was based, retweeted this video essay. So the layers here are amazing. You have Jeff VanderMeer writes a book, Alex Garland does a very loose film adaptation of that book, someone makes a video essay about the film adaptation, and then the original author of the book watches that video essay and starts a conversation on Twitter. What does he say? So about the video essay, he says, fascinating and thoughtful about the Annihilation book and movie, spoilers of course. I will say my interpretation of the movie is assimilation, though. That's why Kane's condition changes. Now for a moment I thought, Jeff, are you having us on? You wrote the book. You consulted with Alex Garland. Surely you, of all people, know what the ending of the movie means, right? Why are you talking about your interpretation of the movie's ending? But actually, as we've said, the film is a very loose adaptation of the book, meaning that Jeff VanderMeer himself, in a way, is interpreting the film alongside the rest of us. Alex Garland might well have tipped him off about some things that we don't know, but not everything, it seems. Here's an interview featuring both Alex Garland and Jeff VanderMeer.
And so the movie surprised me in several places in a really interesting and useful and just kind of like blew me away in places that I didn't expect, because of course I wrote the book. So in theory, you know, it's all familiar to me. But no, I thought it was a really beautiful and that mix of beauty and terror that is in the movie is also in the book, and I think it's very effective on the screen.
So VanderMeer's interpretation of the movie's ending is assimilation, presumably meaning that by the end of the film, the shimmer has become integrated into the wider world. So now that that colourful boundary has dissipated, where does the shimmer's influence reside? Well, definitely within Kane and Lena. Beyond them, who knows? Will it go on to transform all life on Earth? Will it go on to transform inorganic material on Earth? If Kane and Lena have children, will they inherit some of the characteristics from the shimmer and pass those on down the generations? Jeff VanderMeer goes on in the tweet thread. I also take the doubling of the house at the beginning with the house in Area X as proof it's already begun. That's such a cool detail. The house inside the shimmer, where the bear attacks, is almost identical to what we see of Lena's house outside the shimmer. So the shimmer isn't just transforming what's inside of it, it's taking information from the world beyond and mirroring it. VanderMeer again, and I don't think it's coincidence that the mutated lichen here resembles a map of the world, or a world. Wow, mind blown. What if the shimmer is actually looking out at the entire rest of the world and expressing that information through its biology? Or perhaps as it was falling to Earth, it remembered something of that view and then expressed it through the lichen, a kind of biological photograph. In either case, it seems set on conquering the entire world, whatever that means. And remember, we're not even sure if this alien is conscious.
What did it want?
I don't think it wanted anything.
It attacked you.
It mirrored me. I attacked it. I'm not sure it even knew I was there.
It's not clear whether it's a self-aware organism. It might be operating by pure instinct, like a plant or a fungus. And one of the things I love most about doing this channel is learning from you guys, because on my previous video I got a ton of amazing comments pointing out details in the film that I hadn't noticed. And I'd just like to rattle through some of those now because I think they're really interesting. So Phil Bernhard 7121 said, that scene with the Mandel bulb below the lighthouse was one of the most incredible ever. to which we were all thinking, what is a Mandelbulb? And someone else jumped in, yes, shape of this object is named Mandelbulb because it's part of a Mandelbrot set rendered in 3D space and is reminiscent of a bulb. And continuing on that train of thought, Mr. Novetzi said, I think it was an extra-dimensional being or part of one lost in our dimension, universe, or even sent here to study. When the Doctor dissolves, that's Ventress, and the bubble thing gets formed, that is just like a hypercube or a hyperglobe, folding within itself endlessly, formless in 3D. When it absorbs Lena's DNA and starts to become her, Lena tries to get out of there, but she only travels in 3 dimensions, while this being still has a foot in the 4th, or higher, dunno, jumping from the underground to the first floor of the lighthouse before Lena gets there, a sort of bend in space, moving outside the boundaries of 3D. Just imagine how weird would it be for 2D beings if we just showed up one day and our presence alone started to affect their entire reality. We wouldn't know how to communicate aside from mimicry, which I think is the most basic form of communication. I also don't think that the alien was trying to stop her from going outside, it was just mimicking her movement of going outside so hard that it squished her against the door. Such an interesting interpretation, I kind of love that. I guess it appears limited in space for much of the movie, doesn't it? Because, well, it's a meteorite to begin with, and then it's this kind of expanding zone of the shimmer. And it appears that its influence on the world at that point is confined to Area X. Maybe its extra-dimensional abilities kind of develop as the story goes, or maybe it is simply choosing not to use them for much of the movie. Alabama Pilot 244 says, the shimmer isn't modifying and refracting genetics, it's refracting all of reality. Memories are recreated, tattoos transfer from one person to another, accents change from person to person, it's remixing elements of reality itself. And I think that's a really helpful point that I don't think I made especially clear in the previous video. Yeah, it's not just the DNA that's changing in organisms, it appears to be remixing all sorts of elements. And the fact that it's potentially recreated a house within the shimmer, that shows the scale on which this is happening. Skates Bunny says, I found the movie very moving as a metaphor for trauma and loss of identity. As we change and grow, our old selves die. Who are we now? Are we better this way? Are we still ourselves? Does it matter? Yes, and I think I've seen that interpretation in a few places, that the film is actually a metaphor for trauma and the kind of ongoing impact that that has. I guess good stories can be read at multiple levels, can't they? There's the kind of most basic interpretation of what's happening in the plot, but then there can be all sorts of deeper meanings layered on top of that. MF Limited says, excellent work, man. I love this film and this was a great review. Wow, that's very kind. Thank you very much. One thing that fascinated me is the good-evil difference. As humans and under the laws of God, we decide what is evil and what is not. Is a virus evil, or does it merely exist to do its thing? How much somebody fought against the shimmer seems to have had an effect on what happened. The deer seemed to be living in perfect harmony with its doppelganger, whereas it would appear the bear fought. The woman who fought died horribly, but the one who gave in to the shimmer merely turns gently into a flowery tree. I slightly disagree about the end. Her eyes were not merely glazed, they shimmer. She has brought back some of the shimmer with her. If the two of them reproduce, what will happen? And yeah, that's an excellent question, isn't it? Will the effects of the shimmer be passed on down through the generations? And I think that's a really good point, that the shimmer kind of functions like a virus. It's just doing its thing. And we might say, well, you know, viruses can't help it. That's just the way they are. And yet we recognise their impacts on the world as, I mean, they play a role in creation, evidently, but they leave such a trail of destruction and devastation in people's lives, often bringing death. And so my thinking on this, I'd love to hear your thoughts, is that there are all sorts of elements in creation that are frustrated and broken, that we are living in a broken world. and viruses, or the way that viruses operate today, is a kind of outworking of that. Garwin Rosser 8907 says, if we took the biblical context further, then perhaps the Shimmer could be a reimagining of the Garden of Eden, and the entity could be the serpent, where humanity gained knowledge and was cast from Eden, being the very first act of self-destructive behaviour. The passing of the grenade at the end is a reversal of the apple of knowledge and the temptation of the serpent. When she returns, she is uncertain who she is, almost as though she has lost knowledge and returned to a state of innocence. Also, as a clue, I think both are human, as the entity touches the burnt corpse first, which then transfers the fire to everything else, implying heavily that it's actually still part of the Shimmer. And going further on the biblical connotations, Johnny Lindstead 3645 says, you're missing a few things in your deeper analysis. The names used. Cain is in the Bible, a story about a man that kills his brother and is cursed for it. Funny enough, he's religious in the movie as well. The name Lena means light or torch in both Hebrew and ancient Greek. In the Bible, Cain was the firstborn of Adam and Eve, the first human born and not created, and the first murderer at that. This caused him to be cursed by God, bearing forever that curse, and what has been called the mark of Cain. The use of symbols like the Ouroboros has a lot of interpretations, not only death and rebirth. That's so interesting. I'm gutted I didn't pick up on the Cain stuff. How did I miss that? Now, it's fair to say I also got some pushback for looking at the film through a biblical lens. Ian says, actually, as a quick Google would have told you, VanderMeer's inspirations for Annihilation were he went on a 14-mile hike through St. Mark's National Wildlife Refuge, the 2010 Deepwater Horizon oil spill, a dream about walking down endless subterranean stairs with living words on the walls, the idea to inhabit a world filled with sophisticated, largely misunderstood organisms. He was not in any way influenced by any Bible stories. Your explanation says what it means to you, but that says nothing about what it meant to the author. It says nothing about what the book is about. The book, and hence the movie, doesn't have a theology. Now, this is a really helpful comment, actually, because it gives me an opportunity to clarify, I guess, why I keep bringing up the Bible in my videos. I guess I'm coming from the point of view that reality does have meaning baked into it, that there is a kind of deeper meaning to all of reality. This conversation that Joe Rogan had with Warren Smith kind of expresses what I mean.
When you're writing a movie, when it clicks into place, you can feel it. And they call it cracking the story. And they hire writers to crack the story, almost like it's a math problem. So to me, that indicates that there's like this fabric, this is how I think about it, there's this fabric of reality that stories tap into, that you're trying to connect to, and so you feel it when it clicks in, and you're almost, when it does click and you have that hook, you're like, this is the reason to make why this movie is interesting.
Right.
Then you're almost making it for the sake of the story, not the audience, but the audience will come as a consequence.
Yeah.
As opposed to today, where people think they can make movies for the audience, like Disney, but they're discarding the very fabric of the reality of these stories, that thinking, well, we can change Snow White.
Right.
And then that screws them up.
Now, I don't know what Warren Smith's personal beliefs are, but I think he's onto something there. The obvious question is, what is that fabric of reality? What is that fundamental meaning of the universe? And as a Christian, I would say Jesus, he is the Logos. If the Bible is describing reality itself, then biblical ideas are kind of inescapable in any storytelling. That's a big claim, and I'm not expecting everyone to agree with me on that. I think where I would find more agreement is that the West, in particular, has been shaped by centuries of Christianization, and it would be weird if that didn't show itself in our storytelling. As Antonio Garcia Martinez says, the Western mind is like a tuning fork calibrated to one frequency, the Christ story. Hit it with the right Christ figure and it'll just hum deafeningly in resonance. So there's a general sense in which all storytelling relates to the Bible. There's a particular sense in which Western storytelling relates to the Bible. And I think there's some evidence to suggest that Alex Garland, at least, even as an atheist, is quite conscious of the biblical ideas that he puts into his films. When you watch a film like Men, for instance, I mean, the Adam and Eve and Eden parallels there are so overt that I think he realises what he's doing. Final comment kind of on that from Bo Slim. Love this movie. Interesting to hear a Judeo-Christian take on the symbolism. I interpreted the annihilation presented to be very much akin to the annihilation of the self, or ego death, found in Buddhist philosophy. I'm not familiar with the director's views, but you seem to be conflating atheism with nihilism. All the hardcore atheists I know, including myself, are humanists who find meaning in our relationships with people and animals, and with society in general. Thanks so much for that comment. That's really helpful to hear your perspective. Many atheists aren't hardcore nihilists. In fact, very few people are actually hardcore nihilists, which I'm very thankful for, by the way. And so I don't want to say that atheists have meaningless lives at all. The question is your atheism giving you a foundation for believing that life is meaningful? Or is your belief in meaning kind of in spite of your atheism? It's interesting you put the word meaning in quotation marks, and I don't want to read too much into that, but I think a lot of atheists would say the fact that we feel like life is meaningful, that's kind of an illusion, because there's no ultimate objective meaning out there. The universe ultimately boils down to molecules in motion, and we're hurtling towards the heat death of the universe, and evolution is this very brutal, unguided process that has happened to produce us. And therefore, the meaning in our lives that I think you talk about here, the meaning that we have in our relationships under atheism, it's kind of defined by what we find to be meaningful. And it seems that in that case, different atheists will find meaning in different places, and it's a sense of, well, you do you. There's nothing up here that adjudicates what's more meaningful. And theism argues that there is an objective meaning out there, which is beyond us and independent of our personal preferences and proclivities. There is actually genuine meaning to existence itself, and I think that then provides a perfect foundation for us to find our relationships and our lives to be meaningful. Well, there we go. This has been fun. Thanks so much for writing those comments. There were so many good ones I wanted to read, but this video would probably be a day long if I went through all of them. So I've tried to choose a sort of representative sample, but thanks so much for writing those. And I love hearing from you guys. If you want to interact more, you can join our Discord server, link in the description below. And we have more conversations like this and about film in general. If you'd like to support the channel, you can check out my Patreon, link also in the description below, patreon.com/Thomas Thorogood. Thanks so much for watching. I'm so grateful for all of you guys tuning in. I hope you have a great day. God bless, and I will see you soon.